Hi, welcome to Surrogacy 101. Thank you for joining us all. I'm Lisa Schuster. I'm the director of our Gay Parenting Assistance Program. Also here with me today is Ron Poole Diane, our executive director here at Men Having Babies, Jenny, who is our director of operations, and Sarah, who is director of business development. We're so excited to bring you this topic. It is a very high level look about what surrogacy is, who's involved, what's involved in the process. We hope that you will join us back for future events or webinars to learn much more detail about each of these subject matters. But your main takeaway from today is a great understanding of what surrogacy is.
All right, so what is surrogacy? Surrogacy is the act of a woman choosing to carry a child or children for another individual or couple, but with that full intention of giving that child or children to the intended parents at birth. Intended parents can be a single man, a single woman, a heterosexual couple, or a same-sex couple. There are two types of surrogacy. There's traditional surrogacy, and that's less than 5% of the surrogacy done in the US today. In that case, the surrogate donates her eggs and carries the pregnancy. And the conception can occur through artificial insemination with no need for IVF. It's typically less expensive, but there may be a lot of additional legal and emotional considerations. More than 95% of the surrogacies done in the US today are gestational surrogacy. In that case, you have two women involved. You have the gestational carrier, who is the surrogate, but she is not biologically related to the child or genetically related to the child, because you have an egg donor, who is the second woman involved, who is not the gestational carrier. It is more expensive, but there are fewer legal and emotional considerations. And that's why it's more popular today. There's a lot fewer pitfalls.
Now we'll be hearing from Ron as he talks about what's important in your family planning and what you need to talk about with yourself, with your partner, in order to make those decisions.
Thank you, Lisa. So in the course of this presentation, you will come across several different decisions that you will have to approach together if you're part of a couple or by yourself. And it is one of the best preparation steps you can make to think through those decisions before you embark on your journey. And if you are part of a couple, you have to be aligned, the two of you. It is typically natural that one of you would have a slightly different approach than the other. There's sometimes the driver and the passenger type of approach, but it's okay, and you just need to be able to communicate amongst yourselves. There will be decisions about timing, about budgeting, about location. You need to know, what you can, what you're expecting, but what you also realistically able to, afford. What is your expectation regarding how long the process is going to be, and also, how you feel the process is going to play out. And let's dive into some of the specifics. So there will be decisions, and those decisions are going to depend on your values and how you envision your family and how you know yourselves. For instance, there will be decisions such as, do you transfer two embryos? There'll be one embryo. That's a medical decision, but also, how do you envision your future family? Do you envision the family as just one child with more than one child? How important is it for you specifically to be a biological father to one of the children or the child that you're going to have? Those are things you want to think about, and they will dictate how some of the decisions you have control over regarding the actual process. Surrogacy is a lot about relationships. It's about the relationship first and foremost between you and the surrogate. And there are other relationships, with potentially the egg donor associated with this as well. And you need to think about what is your short-term and long-term version about that relationship. And in our various programs, we talk about this in length. We have a program called Mindful Look at Surrogacy, where we really dive into this even further at our conferences and in our webinars. But that is something that, once again, will dictate some of your decisions along the way. This is an expensive process. We'll get back to it in a little bit, but each one of us has a different financial risk tolerance. And that could, once again, dictate some of your decisions, because there will be opportunities where there will be a trade-off between some more certainty regarding the expenses versus, maybe the chance of saving on some of them. There'll be all-inclusive packages, baby guarantee, even sometimes some of the clinics call it. Those are things that would depend on how you feel about taking risk. Same in a similar fashion, how much handholding do you need? There will be, once again, trade-offs between the opportunity to have a fuller service versus maybe doing some of these steps more by yourself, being more proactive about them, or just in general getting a slightly more hands-on approach. So depending on how you know yourself and your partner, how you usually go about those things, that would dictate some of your decisions. And then, as mentioned, the timeline. There will be opportunities where there will be a trade-off between time and cost. You need to be patient. Nobody can, go through this very quickly. But if you feel that you are, able to be a little more patient, and might depend on, issues that are beyond your control, then there will be opportunities for you to possibly save on costs that way.
And these are all key things to think about before you dive into those actual steps of surrogacy. So now we're going to hear from Sarah, and she's going to give us an overview of what those actual steps are.
Thanks, Lisa. After you've gone through the process of thinking about your preferences and your vision for your family, one of the first actions that you'll take is to create your embryos. And the timeline for embryo creation can be very variable. One of the first decisions you'll need to make is if you want to use fresh or frozen eggs, and that will really affect your timeline. There are advantages to both, and frozen eggs are becoming more popular, but it used to be that they had a less success rate. And so as science and technology advances, those statistics are getting better for those. But there still are trade-offs for if you go with a fresh or a frozen cycle. If you end up using frozen eggs, the contract portion of it and the screening are already done before you purchase your lot of eggs. Whereas if you do a fresh cycle, you'll choose your donor, and then your donor will go into the clinic and she'll go through all of her screening and her evaluation and workup, and then you'll go into the contract phase of it. When medications actually start from that point forward, assuming you have a successful first cycle, it will take about 35 to 40 days when your donor starts medications until she's gone through the retrieval. During that time, she'll visit the clinic between 7 and 10 times, where she'll have blood work done and they'll monitor the development of her eggs and her uterine lining. At the time when she's about 36 hours prior to retrieval, she'll get what's called a trigger shot. And then they'll go in, they'll retrieve her eggs. Several hours later, they will be fertilized with your sperm. And across the next 2 to 3 days, they will develop, grow into embryos, and be frozen typically at the 5-day mark, 5-day embryos, where they will then be sent off or material from them will be tested. PGT testing will be done to check for chromosomal abnormalities and also single gene defects. At that point, you will then freeze your eggs or freeze your embryos at that point, or you could go on to do a transfer. Most of the time at this point, the embryos are frozen so that you don't have to align your egg donation cycle with your frozen embryo transfer. So now you've got your embryos, and the next part of the journey is to choose your surrogate. Many guys choose to find their surrogate at the same time as they're working on their embryo creation, because that surrogate matching phase can take quite some time, depending on if you're looking independently, if you know somebody who's willing to carry for you, or if you're working with an agency. As Ron alluded to, you need to have a lot of patience to go through this journey. And this is one of those phases where you want to make sure you have the right match and what you're looking for in a surrogate, and the type of relationship you're hoping to have, whether or not you're going to do a single or a double embryo transfer, where she lives. These are all considerations that will factor into how long it takes you to find your best match. When you find that match, similar to your egg donor, your surrogate and her partner will go through a medical screening process. where she will go into your clinic. Most of the time, your clinic will have already pre-reviewed her medical records to make sure there's nothing glaring or wrong on paper. And then they'll have her come into your clinic where they'll do a full physical exam. They'll do blood work, they'll do an infectious disease screening, and they'll actually look at her uterus itself to just check size and shape. And they'll do what's called a saline sonogram, where they'll check the lining, make sure there's no fibroids, anything that would say she's not the best candidate to move forward with a surrogacy. At the same time, or sometimes these steps are reversed depending on who you're working with. She will go through a psychological screening, as will you guys. Many times you'll have a group psychosocial screening as well, to just make sure that you're all in the right frame of mind, that there's no red flags to say you shouldn't move forward at this time. After you've been medically screened, you've been psychologically screened, it's time for legal. A quick overview of legal is that both you and your surrogate will have independent legal counsel to make sure that you're represented fairly and that all negotiations and everything is done correctly, so that there's no questions at the end of this process that the child or children are your children, and the surrogate has no legal responsibilities in any way, shape, or form. So only after legal is completed will you move into your medicated cycle. This can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, where the surrogate will be prepared to receive your embryo, or embryos if you're doing more than one, to be transferred into her. She will then go to your clinic where one of your embryos will be transferred into her uterus. And that is the very exciting time where you're in this very intense period of wait and see. Typically 7 to 10 days after that transfer is when your clinic will order your first blood test, where they're looking for a hormone that will tell you whether or not the pregnancy has taken. And if it has, then they will monitor her. Clinics vary in how long they keep the surrogate under their care. Typically around 10 weeks of gestation, they will release her to her regular OB. Many clinics call that graduating. And at that point, she's treated like a normal pregnant woman for the duration of her pregnancy, where hopefully you make it to a full-term pregnancy. The ideal time is between 39 and 41 weeks. 40 weeks is considered full-term, where she will deliver, and you will have baby or babies in your arms. So I will turn it over to Lisa to give you more information about the professional team involved.
Thank you, Sarah. So there are a lot of people along this journey with you. So we already heard you have your surrogate, you have your egg donor, but there's a whole team of professionals to help guide you on your journey, to help make sure everything is taken care of. So I'm going to go over in brief who those players are and what do they do. So you have your surrogacy agency, and they will screen your surrogate, they will match you with a surrogate, and they will coordinate your journey. And not every agency offers the same level of support. And for you, it's about finding that right fit and what you need for that. But that's the surrogacy part. So they're the one matching with your surrogate and coordinating the aspects of your journey. You'll also be working with a lot of lawyers in this process. They'll draft the contract. They will represent all parties. So you'll have a lawyer for you. Your surrogate will have a lawyer. Your egg donor will have a lawyer. And you might even have another lawyer for parentage. And then maybe a lawyer back home when you're bringing your baby home. So lots of lawyers in this. They will also help you establish your parental rights, which is really the goal of this, is to ensure that you are parents of your child. You also have your fertility clinic, your IVF clinic, some people call it, your reproductive endocrinologist, or RE for short. So your doctor basically is that. They will do the medical screening of all parties. They will do the actual medical part of your embryo creation. They will retrieve the eggs if you're doing a fresh cycle. They'll create the embryos, and they will transfer them and monitor your surrogate to ensure pregnancy has occurred. So that's the medical portion. And then you have a lot of other people that play maybe a bit of a smaller role, but still a critical part of your journey. If you choose to work with an egg donor agency, if your clinic doesn't have one in-house, or you just choose that route, you may need an immigration attorney. You will have mental health professionals doing that psychosocial evaluation. You'll have genetic counselors. You'll have escrow. Usually it's an independent company that holds that. And you also might need to use somebody for insurance reviews or placing insurance policies. So a lot of different players on this journey with you. And usually a big question comes up talking about independent or agency. Both routes are completely doable. If you do choose to work with an agency, they handle all those logistics and do a good part of that work on your behalf in coordinating it. So again, they're going to find and screen, match you with a surrogate. There'll also be a liaison. So you can talk about great things, about pregnancy updates, about how she's feeling, get to know her on a personal level, and they'll deal with maybe the more topics that you don't want to talk about as much, relating to compensation or bills or things like that. And they also are a great intermediary if there is a breakdown of communication or maybe a go-to that you want to run something through. They also work to ensure all necessary steps are taken, making sure all those T's are crossed and I's are dotted, that everything takes place on time and make sure your journey stays on track. They will also coordinate with clinics and other providers. They'll help schedule monitoring appointments and all of that. And they really oversee and guide you throughout that journey, really starting from that matching with your surrogate all the way through delivery and helping you coordinate that route as well. And again, I said there was a lot of lawyers. Sarah talks briefly about contracts as well, between the egg donor and yourselves, between the surrogate and yourselves. But there's some other parts that a lawyer will do. A lot of times you'll have your wills or your healthcare proxies drawn up if you don't already have them. They'll also work to establish your parentage. This can happen pre or post birth, depending on where the baby is delivered. Great questions to learn more about in future seminars that go into much more detail about this complex subject. But this is what will establish you as parents. Very critical, very important. After the birth, it's not the end of the line for lawyers. You often will need them, different lawyers or the same lawyer. You might need to do a second parent adoption. You might need to have a citizenship lawyer. You might need help getting passports and immigration, just depending on what your particular needs are, where your baby was born, where you reside, and what you want for your child. So a lot to think about. Even more so about the IVF clinic, but I will turn it over to Sarah and she can talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Lisa. So the clinic, as we've spoken about a bit already, is one of the first professional players that you'll need to pick for your journey. And as Lisa said, your clinic is going to be responsible for screening everybody that's involved with this journey, your egg donor, your surrogate, and your intended parents as well. And the screening, includes physical exams, infectious disease screenings, everything necessary to make sure that all parties are medically able to participate in the journey. They're the ones who will actually be involved with creating your embryos and then doing the transfer of the embryo to your surrogate. Your clinic will monitor your donor and your surrogate. So your clinic is responsible for prescribing the medications that are necessary to maintain the correct hormone levels for both the donor and the surrogate. And they will reach out to local clinics many times if your donor or surrogate does not live within traveling distance to come back for all of the frequent appointments. They will coordinate with a local clinic to her to make sure that she's getting the testing done as needed. And then for the fun part, they will monitor after the transfer, the pregnancy, continue to prescribe medications as needed, and then will monitor until around 8 to 12 weeks of gestation is what most clinics like to do. Something important to touch on here is the difference between a single or a double embryo transfer. And this still is a controversial topic. When the first IVF baby was born in 1978, I think, it was very common 20, 40 years ago to transfer, just to throw in 2, 3, 4 embryos and kind of cross your fingers and hope for success. And that success rate was low. We were looking at 20%. But doing that increased risks a lot because we ended up with a lot of multiple gestation pregnancies, triplets, quadruplets, multiple order. So today, with the advancement of science and technology, we are at a point where transferring one embryo, so ET stands for embryo transfer, transferring one has about a 65% success rate, whereas transferring two, you're looking at about 80%. There are a whole lot of reasons to advocate for only transferring one, and that is primarily because twins or multiple gestation pregnancy is just so much higher risk. and you have a higher chance of those babies being born prematurely and needing time in the NICU and potentially long-term complications. Securing insurance and paying for medical costs for children that are born so premature can really be an obstacle that is hard to surmount. Intended parents sometimes do choose to transfer to, and it's really driven by the 2-for-1 mentality, where they really want to have 2 babies. So it's just really something that we encourage you to talk with your clinic about. Really make sure you guys are on the same page so that you know the risks that are associated with transferring 2 instead of 1. I will turn it back over to Lisa, or she's going to give you some tips on your journey.
So now you kind of have an overview of the logistics of the nuts and bolts, the kind of logical part of how a surrogacy journey will go, the timeline, the moving parts, but there's a whole other emotional component to it. It's a very complex process. It's an expensive process, but it's also a very emotional process. And so we really want you to have some tips, some thought about how that journey can hopefully be a smooth one. We could almost guarantee that you will have at least some setbacks, hiccups along the way. And so it's really down to communication and how you handle that. A smooth journey is not necessarily one free of those, but one that you can overcome and continue on. Really, that relationship with your surrogate is so important. And it's important to think of her not as a service provider, but somebody, a partner with you in this journey. And it's not just her in it, it's her entire family, her community a lot of times as well. So you're not just working with a single woman, building a relationship with a single person, you're building it with an entire family, an entire network of people who really are going to be some of your great supporters as well. It's a really beautiful thing that grows kind of 2 families together, 2 communities together through the course of this journey. Really having that great relationship, having support from you and from her family is a great way for a surrogate to maintain engagement and feel positive about the process. It can be a lot to go through. There's a lot of medical screening. There's a lot of injections, which are not a lot of fun. And it's just a long process, and continuing to have that support is really critical. If you can, which we know is not always possible, but visiting the surrogate and her family is a really wonderful way to keep those bonds going and growing. A Skype call also works. Texting, it's really about finding that right fit for you guys and for your surrogate and her family, but really maintaining that communication. Growing that relationship is really an important part for a smooth journey. It really helps weather those things, whether it's a failed transfer, whether it's a scare or the need for bed rest or something like that. Having that close relationship is really important. And part of growing that close relationship is really adjusting your expectations, giving up some of your need to control the situation, and really kind of putting a lot of trust in your surrogate, and really having any of those anxieties that you might have in the process or feeling towards the journey, to find a way to work through those without kind of putting that or giving that to your surrogate to shoulder. Maintaining good communication is key in life, I think, not just in the surrogacy journey. But really, most things can be worked through, can be overcome if you have that already great relationship, that good communication going. You really can see most things through. The biggest things I've seen in my experience have come through a breakdown in communication. So it's not necessarily the hurdle that was placed in front of them that derailed things, but it was that communication breakdown that really derailed a journey. So communication is key for sure. We also recommend reviewing our framework for ethical surrogacy, really to give you an understanding of all the ethical implications and why these processes that we went through and all that screening is important, and how to ensure that your journey and your quest to become a parent is still within those ethical guidelines. Kind of keeping on of that, stressors that you might feel or things that might cause some issues along the way. Again, it's such a huge process, emotional, uncertain, And for a lot of times it's outside of your hands, right? You're relying on a lot of people um, throughout this journey, and that can create a lot of stress. It's definitely probably one of the most stressful things that you will go through. I like to think that it's worth it at the end to go through all of that, but it can cause stress, and which can impact your own relationship with your partner. It can carry through to your relationship with your friends, your family, your surrogate as well. So it's really important to find a way to help manage that stress. Um, you might turn to friends and family for that, but they might just increase it. This is a very different process than almost everyone is used to. Um, you might find more help with a professional therapist, a mental health professional in the surrogacy field to help you through that. You'll already have contact with them from your psychosocial evaluation. We always recommend reaching back out to them, reaching out to your agency. Us here at Men Having Babies, we can help connect you with someone as well. Kind of handling that stress, managing your own anxieties in a healthy way outside of that surrogate relationship is really key to that. And really understanding what your partner's mechanisms are for that as well. I would really recommend talking with your partner about it, going through and really establishing those what works best for you within your partnership before taking this on. Really have that firm foundation to start with before going through a journey, and really don't hesitate to reach out for help in managing that stress or anxiety when it's needed, and especially for such a huge process. There are some really key things to talk about, to be on the same page about when going through a journey. Really, before you even match, your agency should be screening for this. If you're matching independently, you'll also want to make sure you don't skip these crucial points. The biggest one I would say is the stance on selective reduction or terminating a pregnancy. It's something people don't want to think about. It's a very sad subject, and we hope that you don't come to this, but it is critical to know what you want should a situation occur, what your partner wants, make sure that is aligned and you've come to an agreement, and then match with a surrogate who has those same views. This is not something anyone should ever compromise on. I promise you there is the right surrogate match out there for you whose views will align with you. You shouldn't say, I think I found the great surrogate. I really want to match with her, even though she would never terminate a pregnancy. And we do want to, but I'm sure it won't come up. I'm sure the baby's going to be fine. That's absolutely a no-go. You need to have the same views. You should talk about it in advance with your surrogate. You should talk about it again at your psychosocial interview, and you should have it in your contract as well, what your views are on selective reduction and terminating the pregnancy. You also need to be on the same page about number of embryos to transfer. You will hear in depth at our medical panels and webinars at future events talking about the medical risks of embryo transfers, but this one is just talking about making sure your views and your surrogate views are aligned. If you are hoping to transfer 2 embryos, you need to match with a surrogate that also is hoping to transfer 2 embryos. If she only wants to transfer 1, you definitely want to reconsider and if that aligns with your decision, or wait for another match to come along. You should never try to coerce anybody into transferring more than 1 embryo if that is what they are set on. And then the location of delivery. And this can mean a lot of things. Usually we think about, where she's going to deliver, what state she's in, but it also kind of means where you want to deliver. Are you envisioning a level 3 NICU hospital with, the best and greatest of all medical technology, or are you picturing a home birth and a water birth with a midwife there? Because your surrogate probably has what she's expecting as well, and you want those to be aligned. If she's hoping to deliver at home with a midwife and you're hoping for top-notch NICU hospital delivery, then that is not a match for you. You should definitely be aligned in your views of how you want the delivery to be. And that kind of dives into the next one of what your relationship wants to be. It's a lot of what are you envisioning your relationship's going to be during the pregnancy, for birth? Are you expecting to be there? Does she also want you to be there at the birth? And what are you envisioning for the future? Do you want to have somebody who wants to remain in your lives, in your child life? Are you hoping for something that's really just more in the moment and no expectation of future relationship? I would say for the most part, obviously there's a match for everybody and people have different viewpoints, but for the most part, I think surrogates do want to have that continuing relationship, and it doesn't have to be as best friends and super close, but at least some sort of continuation of relationship. I know for me, it was really critical that my kids would get to meet the babies that I delivered, whether or not what our relationship was or was not, or what it grew into. That sort of base level of relationship was really necessary for me, and it was important for them as well, and which is why we were a great match. You also might have some questions for your egg donor outside of that usual medical screening. If you are choosing to have a known donation, what sort of relationship do you want to have with your egg donor? Are you hoping just to have a contact, somebody to be able to reach out to, or do you want her involved in your family on a more personal level? You'll obviously want to know about her genetic and family history. But you also might want to know about, has she donated before and does she have plans to donate again? Different people have different viewpoints about the fact that their children might have many biological half siblings out there. And if your donor, even if she's the first time, she might have plans to donate again. And that's something that you should talk about and make sure that aligns with your viewpoints as well. So now to jump back into a little bit more of the detailed or the finer points, I'm going to turn over to Ron to talk about costs.
Unfortunately, this is an integral part, a big part of this journey. You need to be aware and you need to be smart and informed about the cost associated with this journey. Now, as an organization, this is something we really very conscious and very focused on. We have a financial assistance program. And one of the derivatives of that is that we really understand how much this typically costs. We have dozens of agencies and clinics every year that actually hand us their cost sheets. We've created a universal system to be able to decipher and translate them into a set of terminology that we created into a budgeting guide. And we also have a feedback loop from the dozens of couples we help every year in the financial assistance program. So the budgeting guide we created is something we go over in details at our events. It's also available on our Facebook group. We have the document if you want to reach out and see both the one that has averages, as well as we have a blank one there if you want to use for your own journey. So when you think of, so we're not going to obviously dive into all the costs and at the level of granularity that we go over in our webinars. And we also have a monthly workshop for new members if they're interested in doing their budget in details with us. So what you need to know in general is that, first of all, you have professional fees and you have fees associated with the costs and the compensation for the surrogate and the egg donor. So the top row here are the professional fees. And we talked about the fact that, the various professionals you're going to be working with, what services they're going to provide and how they vary. There's some that, are more hands-on, full service, others that are less so. And that would affect, of course, your cost. The cost of the agency, the clinic and the legal services are some things that you can, very openly discuss with the providers when you have your first consultation with them and do the kind of comparison that you would otherwise do in similar situations. We'll talk at the next slide about some of the decisions or the issues that you can control in those. But then there, a lot of the costs are associated with the compensation and the expenses for the surrogate and the egg donor. So first, I will also mention here, Lisa mentioned our ethical guidelines. It is really important, especially when we talk about such, technical or a material thing as costs, that the surrogate is receiving her compensation because she deserves it. It's a restitution. The same with the egg donor. It's a restitution for the discomfort or the physical discomfort that she undergoes, and the egg donor. It is a restitution for the disruption this causes in their lives, especially for the surrogate. This is a long period of time during which a lot of her life will revolve around this and the risk they're undertaking. But beyond, so the compensation is something that you will know when you're matched with a surrogate. You will probably, you need to ask your agency, what is the range of compensation that is typical with the surrogates that they find typically. And that would also vary geographically and with other variables that they can explain to you up front. But then there are things that are going to happen beyond the actual pre-negotiated compensation. And those are the kind of details that we go into in our budgeting guide. Similarly, not as complex with the egg donor, especially if you end up using an egg donor agency, which is something that not everybody does. Clinics have egg donors, and some surrogacy agencies also suggest egg donors, but of course, in that case, you might still have an agency fee associated with that. Another topic we go into a lot of length, unfortunately, it is necessary, is medical insurance. There are other types of insurance also associated with this process. I mean, it's a good thing that there are insurance products to help with this, but it is not simple, and it varies very, very much depending on the details and the circumstances of the journey. And you should be able to understand that with the agency or sometimes a third-party consultant that they would suggest. But let's go forward and see what is it that perhaps you can control a little bit here. And we do talk about the 3 C's here, what there is some choice about, what are the circumstances that might dictate the level of expenses, and what unfortunately is only associated with chance. So as we mentioned, first of all, your decision on which surrogacy professionals to engage would be, of course, very, would impact your costs, and that is something definitely you have choice. But as we'll talk about in a few minutes, you should do your research, and we do have resources to help you with that. The same with health insurance options. Those are things you can research, and those are your choices, and you should be informed about them. There are various egg donation variations, especially the possibility of maybe share an egg cycle, egg donation cycle, or even use frozen eggs. Get informed about those things. There are pros and cons for various options here, and it has to match your family vision. Of course, the number of embryos you transfer, even though we really recommend you only transfer 1, but there will be implications to the cost to this choice. And once again, you can talk to your doctor and understand also from the agency. Surrogates typically get at least $5,000 more if they do agree and you transfer 2 embryos, or there's a pregnancy involving 2 embryos. The number of sperm sources could also have, although albeit less of an impact on the cost of the journey. Where you live, moving on to circumstances, has a huge implication, especially if you live outside the United States. There will be not just travel costs associated, there will be implications to insurance and to legal aspects of the journey that you have no control over if you live outside the United States. And within the United States, we'll talk in a minute about proximity. That might have some implications as well. Your age might have some impact, not that much. And certainly HIV status, people that are HIV negative, positive can become parents. However, there will be some associated additional screening and treatment costs associated with this. And that is something your clinic will be able to tell you right away. It is done routinely, but it would impact the cost. And then, of course, mostly there's a lot of chance here. I mean, even though IVF success rates are much higher than they used to be, you still don't know how many tries you will need specifically. And If you do end up transferring two embryos, that will impact, as mentioned, whether they actually are twins or not. It's a matter of chance. And especially if it's a multiple pregnancy, or otherwise, there could be things such as bed rest and other medical contingencies that would affect the cost. And then there's the geographical locations. You have some control over here. I mean, in general, you might, think, especially in a world that now understands how pandemics can affect our lives, you might want to keep everything local. It's not always possible. Surrogates are being recruited nationally, and to get a good match with a surrogate, you might not always be able to get a surrogate that lives close to you. And the surrogate's proximity to you, not only is it not that easy to control, it is not the most impactful. The donor's proximity to the clinic is one of the most impactful financially, because there will be a lot more monitoring costs and other associated costs if the donor has to travel and be monitored by a satellite clinic if she doesn't live within convenient driving distance to the IVF clinic. So that is something that definitely, even if you need to, do with a little bit less selection or wait a little longer for your dream donor, that is something that could impact your costs significantly. And then if the surrogate cannot live near the clinic or near where you are, sometimes it's worthwhile thinking about whether she lives near a major airport. That could affect travel fares, airfares significantly. And then compensation levels. I mentioned we think the compensation is a way of of restitution, of compensating surrogate and donors for what they are basically deserve to become whole after they in the sacrifice what they do for the sake of your family. But there are various levels, and especially when it comes to donors, there is a level suggested by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine that is reasonable. It is not enforceable, but ask your agency or the clinic, whether the surrogates are being, the donors are being compensated based on the ASRM level or not. Otherwise, it could sometimes go way beyond that or kind of designer donor situations that obviously it's your choice to avoid. And then sometimes there would be an extra cost or a fee associated with the fact that you're being matched with a donor that has proven fertility or proven success. That may sound, a little, weird, but if you're working with a reputable clinic and there is reputable evidence that this donor has had good success in the past, that usually minimum, not very high addition to the fee might be worthwhile. However, surrogates who are getting compensated more because they are experienced surrogates is something that, regardless of whether they think it's justified or not, will have absolutely no impact on your success rates. So this is something that you might want to consider, whether the agency tells you this is an experienced surrogate. Every surrogate is going to be experienced in giving birth. By definition, in the United States, you will never be matched with a surrogate that hasn't given birth. But had she given birth for a surrogacy child before has no impact on your success rates, and whether that's worth $5,000 more in your budget is something that you can think of seriously. I'm going to hand it over to Jenny to talk about the resources we have available for you to get all this information.
Thank you, Ron. I'm guessing that right now you might feel a little overwhelmed. That's okay. Take a deep breath. It was a lot of information, and there are a lot of choices that you have to make. As all of us have mentioned, it's a complicated process with a wonderful, wonderful goal at the finish line. And we are here to help you. So we have lots and lots of resources available to help you. Not mentioned on this slide are all the resources you can find on our website. So we do absolutely encourage you to review our website and see all the wonderful resources that we have for you. We have bulked up our resources in the last few months, and we have lots of ways for you to get more information about all of the different topics we've covered today. Of course, the best way to get that information is to attend a conference. Luckily, we usually have some conferences planned, whether they have to be virtual or whether they can finally be in person again. So we hope to see you at one of those conferences. But in addition, we have webinars, we have recordings, And one of the most important things you're probably thinking after that, just that recent discussion of cost with Ron, is what about financial support? We do have two different programs for financial support. One is the membership benefits program. And with that, you can find it at menhavingbabies.org/membership. You can find all about joining Men Having Babies as a supporting member. And with that program, you get access to kinds of discounts and all kinds of different products available to you from providers who have partnered with us, and they have donated some special discounts on products, or they're offering you a special deal on something, or maybe even they'll let you come and have a consultation that's more in depth for free. So take a look at those from all kinds of IVF clinics and agencies, as well as other complementary providers, insurance agencies, and things like that. In addition, membership has other benefits where you can have access to our video archive and all kinds of other things. Again, www.menhavingbabies.org/membership will give you a lot of information. Once you're a member, you are then eligible to apply for our Gay Parenting Assistance Program. That's what we call the GPAP program. It's very well known, and it is a wonderful program that is based on financial need. So if you're a member, you can apply at no further cost, and you can see if your financial situation falls within the guidelines that are adjusted for where you live, that we determine that you might need a little bit of help to become parents. And there's two different stages of the GPAP program. You can visit menhavingbabies.org/GPAP to learn a little bit more. But stage one is a discount program. The discounts are generally higher than what is available through the membership benefits program. And then stage two is a separate application process. It takes a lot more time, but those are the couples, about 12 to 20 per year, that we partner with, and we offer pro bono services that are donated by the providers, plus grants if those are needed, and we become a partner with you, and we see you all the way from the start in the GPAP stage 2 program all the way to your child or children being born. There's also wonderful, wonderful peer support that is available through Men Having Babies resources. Our Facebook group, I definitely suggest that you check that out. The Men Having Babies Facebook page. There's also Planning Biological Parenting. So we have lots of support on Facebook. And then of course our events. So I've already alluded to our in-person conferences. We have some virtual conferences. We have webinars. We also have lots of other events that go on. We sometimes have events that are local in the New York area, or maybe in certain international communities. We have lots of international partners. So joining our Facebook group, you'll hear about those. Visiting our website, you'll see more about those. We also offer support groups to our members, and those groups are available to offer you continued support as you go through this. All of us are here to help you. We would love to hear what questions you have. We would love to hear how else we can help you. If you want to reach any of us who have appeared on this webinar, or anyone at the Men Having Babies team, you can reach us at team@menhavingbabies.org, and we will get back to you and hopefully answer your questions. We are a small team, but very, very dedicated, and we are all here to help you in any way you can on this amazing, amazing journey. We really appreciate you being here today. And I think all of us would like to say good luck. We'll be with you on your journey. We cannot wait to see your baby pictures at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.